You think you know who you are, but what if your soul is hiding the truth? There are memories, dreams, and symbols trying to speak to you right now, and ignoring them is costly. Today, you will finally see what Carl Jung tried to reveal to the entire world. He always believed that the biggest lie we tell ourselves is that we're in control of our own lives. It sounds strange, maybe even provocative, but it's true. The one who really guides us is not our consciousness. It's the unconscious. And that's exactly why so many people feel lost, repeating patterns, reliving old pains, dreaming dreams they don't understand, carrying a shadow they don't know how to name. Most people live like this, disconnected from their own soul, ignoring symbols that could change everything, and believing that their current self is all that exists. But Carl Jung discovered something that turns this idea upside down. What you call your conscious life is only the surface, the shallowest part of your story. The real transformation begins deep inside, where your forgotten memories, silent myths, and persistent dreams live. And today you will finally understand why nothing changes until you learn how to decode this inner language. Why Jung said that life only gains meaning when we illuminate the darkness within us. And more importantly, how memories, dreams, and reflections can reveal who you really are and who you can still become. Get ready. This video isn't meant to be watched. It's meant to be lived. He used to say that the greatest turning point in someone's life happens the moment they realize they don't need to fight their own shadow, but light a candle inside it. It's interesting how many people try to escape the unconscious, as if running away from it would free them from what hurts. But it's exactly the opposite. Running only strengthens what hides. When someone begins to illuminate what they used to avoid, consciousness expands like a window opening for the first time, and in that instant, a silent transformation takes place. The soul, once suffocated, begins to breathe, and it's through this movement that individuation takes its first step, almost imperceptible, but impossible to ignore. Imagine someone walking through a dark hallway carrying only a match. It's little, of course, but when they strike that match, the tiny point of light reveals that the hallway wasn't as short or as simple as it seemed. That's what happens when we face the inner symbols, small sparks that show more than we'd like, yet exactly what we need to see. Many believe their personal myth is something grand, distant, but it actually reveals itself in the most ordinary gestures. In the way a person reacts when confronted, in what they refuse to think about before sleeping, in the dreams that keep returning. All of this is the soul asking to be seen with honesty. Some people think clearing the mind is a quick process, like flipping a switch. But those who look closer understand that consciousness works like the antechamber of an old house. You open the door and discover dozens more. Each one represents an unexplored memory, an old fear, a feeling frozen in time. And as you touch each door, you discover that nothing has vanished. Everything accumulated there, waiting for light. That's why transformation requires patience. You can't clean an entire house in a single day. But with each step, the soul reorganizes itself and reveals something that changes how you see the world. A practical example of this process is the habit of recording dreams daily. It seems simple, maybe even trivial. But when someone writes down their dreams for a few weeks, they begin to notice patterns they never saw before. These dream images work like letters written by the unconscious itself. They bring symbols that reveal intentions, wounds, and desires the person didn't even admit to themselves. The simple act of writing creates a bridge between shadow and consciousness, and little by little, what was chaotic becomes sayable. And because it becomes sayable, it stops being frightening. This is how individuation strengthens, not in haste, but in depth. He also realized that lighting the darkness isn't a task for perfect heroes, but for ordinary people willing to look inward without masks. Transformation begins the moment someone admits, "There's something here I don't yet understand." And in that humility, power is born. The soul stirs, reveals signs, awakens myths that had been asleep. Slowly, they notice they're not prisoners of their shadows, but their guardians. And it's here that something new ignites, a depth of understanding that quietly prepares the ground for the next truth that awaits. He often said that true strength emerges when a person recognizes their own limitation, not as defeat, but as a starting point. It's strange because most people spend their lives trying to look limitless, strong at all times, as if admitting fragility were a sin. But when someone looks at their uniqueness without fear, something inside settles. Consciousness expands and the unconscious stops shouting. It's as if the soul finally had room to breathe with sincerity. And it's in this silent recognition that the transformation so many seek in the wrong places finally begins. Uniqueness is a sacred weight because no one carries the same set of memories, wounds, and dreams. It's like a spiritual fingerprint, unrepeatable, shaped by the symbols that appeared throughout your life. When someone tries to be like someone else, they lose the chance to learn from their own shadow, which is exactly where their greatest richness lives. The personal myth doesn't rise from perfect victories, but from what hurt and left marks. And the more someone ignores this inner signature, the further they drift from the individuation they long to reach. A simple example is someone who spends years comparing their path to others. They look at what a friend achieved, what another shows off, what someone posts online, and feel behind. But they don't see that this comparison is like trying to plant a tree in soil that doesn't belong to it. Every life has its rhythm, its roots, its cycles. When someone understands this, they finally accept their limitations not as walls, but as contours shaping their true form. And within those contours, transformation finds space to grow. To apply this teaching, just observe 3 moments in your day when you feel inferior, insecure, or inadequate. Write what you felt, what you thought, and what triggered those emotions. Over time, you'll see patterns that reveal your own inner myth. This simple exercise exposes shadows that were hidden, allowing the light of consciousness to touch places that once felt unreachable. The soul responds quickly when treated with honesty. And it's surprising how small realizations can trigger deep transformation. Recognizing uniqueness is accepting that you weren't born to repeat anyone else. And by doing so, one discovers that limitation isn't a wall, but a door. A door that opens inward. There, among old memories, personal symbols, and dreams that insist on returning, life starts to make sense in a new way. And as they notice this, questions arise naturally about what truly matters, questions that guide them gently toward the next movement of this inner journey, where the invisible world begins to take form. He noticed early on that the most important experiences in life weren't the ones happening outside, but the ones that left marks on the soul. Human memory is selective. It forgets dates, routines, appointments, but preserves with clarity whatever touched the invisible. There are moments engraved inside us as if written in fire. The first time we felt real fear, the first loss, a dream so vivid it felt real. And it's interesting how, over time, we realize these inner impressions shape our consciousness. Everything else fades, the invisible remains. He understood that outer life fades quickly, almost like a photograph losing color, but the inner world refuses to disappear. Each feeling, each symbolic fragment, each shadowed piece gathers to form a personal myth that follows a person everywhere. And this myth isn't told in words, but in images, recurring dreams, memories that come back out of nowhere, unexplained intuitions. All of this acts like a secret map built by the soul itself, quietly guiding every step of individuation. A simple example is someone who vividly remembers something from childhood, even if no one else in the family does. For others, it was an ordinary day. For them, it was a revelation. Maybe it was a phrase that wounded, a gesture of deep love, a fear they couldn't name. But the unconscious recorded it as a landmark. This memory, seemingly random, becomes an active symbol shaping behaviors, choices, beliefs. And when the person finally traces that thread, they realize much of their life was influenced by something they didn't even know lived inside them. To apply this understanding, take 5 minutes a day to recall something meaningful from the past, whether beautiful, painful, or confusing. By writing these memories down, you get closer to your own core, where the images the conscious mind can't ignore reside. This habit isn't about nostalgia, it's about transformation. The soul opens when someone pays attention to what it tries to say. And little by little, what seemed fragmented begins to reorganize, revealing symbols that explain more about us than any long conversation could. He discovered that the soul is always speaking, The problem is that almost no one listens. The rush of the world steals the silence needed to hear the invisible. But when someone slows down and allows dreams, memories, and shadows to surface, something awakens. They notice a continuous thread connecting everything, what they lived, what they fear, what they desire. This realization creates a clarity difficult to describe but impossible to forget. And it's precisely this clarity that opens the door to the next step of the journey. He always sensed that at some point a person begins to feel a strange discomfort, as if everything around them is perfectly organized, but something inside is out of place. It's the soul's quiet call, whispering that it's no longer possible to live solely for the collective. Most people try to ignore that whisper because following the group feels safer, more comfortable, more predictable. But every time someone shapes themselves too tightly to external expectations, consciousness feels squeezed, like wearing shoes that don't fit. And in that pressure, transformation begins asking for space. Collective identities, family, work, beliefs, groups, ideologies are important, of course. They hold you when the world collapses, serve as harbor, shelter, structure. But when someone stays there too long, they stop listening to their own shadow. The soul begins sending signals, recurring dreams, old memories resurfacing without explanation, sudden irritations, a feeling of "this no longer fits." These inner symbols act as psychological alarms, warning that individuation has stalled. And when that process stops, life stops too. A practical example is someone who follows a career simply because it looks right to others. They try to convince themselves they're happy, but feel an emptiness they can't explain. That emptiness is proof that their personal myth was shelved to fit a narrative that isn't theirs. And the more they try to fit, the more they drift from themselves. Suddenly, they feel they're living someone else's life. And even though that feeling is uncomfortable, it's a gift. The unconscious saying, "Look here, something yours needs to return." To put this into practice, observe which decisions you make to please others and which you'd make if no one were watching. Write 3 choices you'd make differently if guided only by your soul. Sometimes the simple honesty of this exercise opens a clearing within consciousness. It's as if the shadow, that forgotten part, extends its hand saying, "I'm still here." Nam. And when someone accepts that invitation, they discover the true path isn't the one the world considers brilliant, but the one that lights their inner transformation. He often said that a day arrives when each person is called to walk alone, even if surrounded by people. It's not isolation, but a subtle rite separating the life lived for the world from the life lived for oneself. In that moment, the individual realizes they can't hide behind collective roles anymore. They must assume their real form, even if still forming. And by doing so, something inside rearranges, as if the soul finally had space to breathe. And it's precisely in this newly opened space that the next inevitable question arises. He used to say that the unconscious is not a storage room for forgotten things, but a living root sustaining everything we are. Consciousness is only the treetop, visible, organized, apparent, but deep below, in the silent darkness of our inner soil, the soul truly grows. Each symbol that emerges, each inexplicable feeling, each persistent shadow is proof of something profound working quietly. And when someone understands this, they stop fearing the dark and begin treating it as nourishment. That's where transformation grows, in places techniques alone can't reach. The unconscious works like a reservoir of ancestral energy and wisdom. It's made of layers that existed long before a person was born, memories of humanity, ancient myths, patterns spanning generations. That's why sometimes someone dreams of something they've never lived, yet feels strangely familiar. These are inherited images, symbols, explaining what consciousness can't yet articulate. Each dream like this is a letter from the deep soil of the soul, inviting the person to discover their own internal map. And the more they read these letters, the faster individuation unfolds. A simple example is someone who freezes when making an apparently small decision. They imagine it's a rational issue, but something deeper is at play. Maybe an old memory, maybe a personal myth never understood. This hesitation, often labeled as weakness, is actually the unconscious protecting something important. When the person listens to this inner movement, they realize their decisions aren't random. They're silent dialogues between shadow and consciousness. And seeing this changes the way they decide forever. To experience this process, observe subtle sensations before making an important choice. Ask yourself, does this contract me or expand me? Contraction often comes from shadow, guarding a memory not yet understood. Expansion comes from the soul, offering direction. This simple exercise builds a bridge between consciousness and unconsciousness. And over time, people start trusting their intuition, which is nothing more than ancient wisdom becoming audible. Eventually, symbols that seemed random begin organizing themselves like constellations. He knew the unconscious, as mysterious as it seems, is not an enemy. It shapes, nudges, guides, sometimes even shakes a person so they finally wake up. It's the root sustaining the tree even during storms. Once someone recognizes this role, they stop trying to control everything and begin cooperating with what moves inside. And in that cooperation, the next stage emerges, a deeper encounter with the inner myths that shape our path. He used to say that dreams are like letters sent by the soul, messages that arrive when consciousness finally quiets down. And interestingly, it's in those silent moments that the unconscious speaks the loudest. Dreams, with their enigmatic symbols and seemingly disconnected scenes, reveal truths a person can't face during the day. It's as if the shadow took advantage of the night's darkness to light small lanterns inside the mind. What many people call confusion is actually a deep dialogue. And when someone learns to listen to that dialogue, transformation begins from the inside out. The wisdom of dreams isn't obvious because it doesn't use the linear language of consciousness. Instead, it uses living metaphors, unexpected images, archetypes that feel like they came out of an ancient myth. A river can symbolize change, a house can represent the soul itself, a door can be a decision that hasn't yet been made. Nothing is random. Every element is an emotional memory turned into an image. The unconscious doesn't waste energy. Everything that appears there has a function, a purpose, an intention. The real question is whether the person is willing to interpret it or prefers to ignore it. A clear example is when someone repeatedly dreams of falling. From the conscious mind's point of view, that might seem like just fear, but symbolically, falling can represent loss of control, fear of failure, or even an invitation to abandon a false sense of safety. Dreaming of flying, on the other hand, can be a desire for freedom, expansion of the soul, or the breaking of old limitations. When someone writes these patterns down and calmly reflects on them, they realize their dreams reflect exactly what their individuation is asking for at that moment. They don't predict the future. They reveal the present with frightening precision. If you want to apply this teaching, turn dreaming into a ritual. Keep a notebook next to your bed, and when you wake up, write down everything you remember, even if it seems silly or meaningless. Over time, you'll notice certain symbols repeating. Maybe there's always a road, a window, a specific animal, a stranger who keeps reappearing. These elements are like little threads that, when pulled, reveal the entire inner tapestry. The soul speaks through these images because it knows the rational mind wouldn't be able to handle the same message in direct, literal words. He noticed that the more someone listens to their dreams, the more they begin to understand their own story. The shadow stops being so frightening, the inner myth becomes clearer, the soul gains a voice. Dreams act like lanterns lighting hidden passageways a person would never find on their own, and each revelation makes room for another, as if one door kept calling the next. That's why dreams aren't just nighttime messages. They're ongoing invitations to transformation. And it's exactly this invitation that prepares a person for the next movement, where living and dying stop being opposites and become part of the same flow. He understood that life never presents itself as a closed book, but as a manuscript constantly being rewritten. While consciousness begs for definitive answers, the unconscious insists nothing is as linear as it seems. Each chapter lived brings a discovery, a question, a new shadow to illuminate. And just when someone believes they finally understand everything, the soul changes direction, like turning a page early. This impossibility of completing one's own story isn't a flaw. It's what keeps transformation alive. The feeling of incompleteness is one of the most important symbols of human existence. It appears when someone realizes that no matter how much they achieve, learn, or mature, there will always be something beyond what the eyes can see. It's the personal myth reinventing itself constantly. Individuation isn't a destination, but a continuous process, like a flame needing daily fuel. When someone accepts they will never be totally finished, something inside relaxes. Consciousness stops fighting itself and learns to walk with more lightness. Consider someone reaching midlife who feels their life should be more defined. But looking back, they see decisions they'd make differently, paths they might not choose again, dreams they didn't live. It's easy to interpret this as regret, but for someone with depth, this review is a sign of growth. The unconscious uses these memories as a bridge to expand consciousness. This self-reflection doesn't diminish the person, it expands them. It's a quiet transformation the outer world rarely notices, but changes everything inside. To apply this understanding, choose 3 areas where you feel behind, incomplete, or insecure. Instead of looking for immediate solutions, observe what these feelings reveal about your inner myth. Maybe it's a call to change direction. Maybe it's your soul asking for time. When someone interprets this sense of incompleteness as symbol instead of failure, something aligns. The shadow stops threatening and starts guiding. Individuation deepens because the person stops demanding perfection and begins allowing transformation. He said that in the end, living is accepting that we will never know everything. The soul is vast, the unconscious is deep, and consciousness is only a small lantern in this immense territory. The more light we bring, the more we see the magnitude of the darkness around. And this shouldn't scare us, but inspire us. Because it's in this living darkness that the next symbols begin forming, preparing the individual for new cycles. Life is unfinished, because it's always ready to transform. And it's through this small opening that the next understanding emerges. In the end, he realized the real journey was never about mastering the external world, but about understanding the silent universe inside each of us. And now that you've walked through deep memories, ancient symbols, revealing dreams and reflections you may have never allowed to surface, the inevitable question appears: what will you do with all this? Because knowing doesn't transform anyone, but acting transforms everything. So pause for a moment and look at yourself with sincerity. Which shadows are you still avoiding? Which dreams have you ignored? Which memories are asking to be understood, not forgotten? The soul never speaks by accident. It speaks because it's ready to guide you toward your own individuation, that version of yourself that doesn't just live, but lives with purpose, depth, and awareness. And maybe this is the perfect moment to make a decision you've postponed for too long. Enter into dialogue with your unconscious and allow yourself the transformation it has been quietly asking for. If something in this video touched you, opened a door, explained a feeling you never understood, then leave a comment. I am ready to see my soul. And of course, subscribe to Mind's Silent Echo, turn on notifications, and keep walking this path of self-discovery. Here, you never walk alone.